Hey, gorgeous! Welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast with Holly Wharton, which combines powerful strategies on how to upgrade your business mindset, along with practical business tips to grow your business. This podcast features solo shows with Holly and also interviews with inspiring women entrepreneurs from around the world. Thank you so much for joining us today. And now, here's your host, Holly Wharton.
Hello and welcome to the Business Mindset Podcast, episode 184. This is your host, Holly Wharton, and I'm here with today's special guest, Rebecca Miller. Becs is the founder of Write and Reach, working with inspired entrepreneurs to help you promote your business in a way that feels easy, creative, and fun. Having spent 15 years working in charities and not-for-profits, she took the leap and started her own business in 2013. Her signature course, the Publicity Program, teaches her tried and tested techniques to get your business featured in top magazines and blogs. Welcome, Becs.
Hi, Holly. It's lovely to be here.
I'm excited to have you on the show. Publicity is always, it's one of those things that I think is kind of a mystery to a lot of people. It's like, we all know we want it, we all know it would be helpful, but it's kind of this weird, confusing thing. Yeah. So, very excited about this. So why don't you start out by telling us a little bit about your background and your business journey and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. So I had a bit of a, convoluted journey into business. It almost happened a bit by accident, to be honest with you. I worked, as you mentioned, in the charity sector for most of my career beforehand. But I always had a bit of a niggling feeling that something just wasn't quite right and something was missing. I'd always been really, really into art and really creative. And throughout my 20s, I just completely dropped that. I hadn't done any creating at all. And I was increasingly feeling more and more like my jobs weren't serving me properly. But I just felt really stuck and I didn't know what to do about it. And then I was working for one particular charity, I was doing marketing and PR, and I was also the PA for their chief executive. And the charity went through quite a lot of funding cuts, as often happens in the sector. And I ended up being made redundant, which was a bit of a shock to the system, I have to say. And there were a few of us that happened to. And it was a very small, tight-knit team as well. So that kind of set me a bit off balance. But I picked myself up, thought, right, no. And by this time, I was kind of really getting into the PR side of things and absolutely loved it. So I ended up getting a job with another charity as their media officer. And that was going fine I think I was there for about a year. And then there was another round of redundancy. This was a much bigger charity, and they put our whole team at risk of redundancy. And the process dragged on for quite a long time. And at the time, I was also commuting to work. So I had a 2-hour commute each way each day, which, was not great. It was over the winter. Everyone was getting a bit stressed, not knowing what was happening with their jobs. I was driving, stuck in traffic jams, and I started getting really ill. I was just having cold after cold after cold. Nothing would make me better. I started getting very anxious as well, and I was going for constant interviews and not really getting any traction. So in the end, I just said, that's it, not going to apply for my job. I can't deal with the commuting anymore. I'm just going to leave and see what happens. Now, at that time, one of my colleagues, she said to me, oh, you should check out a website called People Per Hour, where people do freelance work. And I thought, okay, right, well, obviously I need some cash coming in quickly. So I put a profile up on People Per Hour, and within a day, I think, I had my first client, and I was offering a PR service and also a blogging service. And I was kind of a bit taken aback, thinking, okay, right, this is interesting, perhaps, and I'd always been a bit interested in the thought of people who were digital nomads and were able to work from all over the world, but I just couldn't quite figure out how they were doing it. But I actually had all the tools I needed there already. It was just a case of putting all the pieces of the jigsaw together. So I continued with People Per Hour, and at the time I was still thinking of myself as, right, well, I'm doing a little bit of freelance work just as a stopgap till the next job comes along, although I wasn't really wanting the next job to come along in a way. And then I kind of by chance was put in touch with a local organisation here in Bristol called Outset, who were offering free training for people who wanted to set up their own business. So I was like, oh, okay, I'll go along to that. Sounds interesting. And it was just an absolute eye-opening revelation to me that what I was doing could actually become a business. And through that, I met a lot of other people locally who were setting up their own businesses. And it was just really inspiring. And a couple of them actually told me about, firstly, Leonie Dawson.
Yes.
Which I'm sure you know about, lots of your listeners will know about. And I just absolutely loved her stuff. And I was also told about Carrie Green's Female Entrepreneur Association. Mm-hmm. And I just started kind of really reading and listening and devouring all the information I possibly could about this kind of entrepreneurial online business setup. And it just started really sparking all the creativity in me. And I felt alive in a way that I really hadn't done for years, throughout my 20s, I would say. And then so I and then as the actual setup of my business, I went through a couple of different names. And it took me a little while to decide exactly what I was offering and how I was offering it. And I designed my own website, which took me probably about a year. I know. So I didn't do it in a fast, speedy way, but I did it in a way that really helped me to build my own confidence with what I was doing and enabled me to really learn and engage with the online sphere as well. And so that's kind of how I started.
Excellent. And so what were some of the biggest challenges that you had to overcome as you were building this business?
There's a lot of mindset challenges with my own confidence in my ability and what I was offering. And actually, thinking of myself as, yes, I am a business owner. Yes. I am an entrepreneur. I'm not just playing at this. This is a real thing where I'm making money. And definitely kind of the money mindset is still an ongoing thing, which I work on, as much as possible. And I think a lot of people have that, and things like, knowing how much to charge, that's always a biggie for me. But so I'm kind of just really stepping into my own kind of light, I guess, and believing in what I'm doing and believing in myself and the fact that I can do it. And it's been a bit of a journey, and I think it is, a constant journey, but it's just been amazing to go through it. I've really loved it. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I think going into business for ourselves can be such a big personal development journey in terms of expanding our mindset and working on all the stuff that comes up for us.
Definitely. Yeah, so much so. Yeah.
And how did you go about the process of distilling all of this knowledge and information you had in terms of your media experience and publicity experience into packages and products and services and things that people needed in the entrepreneurial online business world?
Yeah, so I had a few ideas, and I went through a few different incarnations of things I was offering, but none of them quite chimed properly. And I did a kind of self-study course by a lady called Rebecca Tracy called Hey Nice Package, which was all around packaging up your service and finding out what your dream clients want and need and putting it together in a way that's going to really resonate with them. And that really helped me to start to get down and focus on what exactly I wanted to offer. And I always had this idea of doing a course, and I really wanted to offer some kind of online program because I taught myself PR when I was working in the charity industry. So I know for a fact that it can be done. And I know that actually as business owners, we're the best people to promote our business. And especially when you're starting out, it's hard to afford really expensive PR agency or something like that. But I still think it's really important as business owners that we know what PR is and what it can do, the benefits that can have for your business. And when you get to the point where you've grown and you're ready to bring someone in, that you have a bit of an understanding of how publicity works and how it can help grow your business. And that's going to help you bring in the best person to support your business as well. And I did, I joined earlier this year, I joined Joanna Hennon, who I know you've also interviewed a couple of times. I joined her mastermind group, and that was just a massive shift for me, because she was showing me how to really get into the soul of my business and to really, and I think having worked in a more corporate environment, I was finding it hard to, I've always been had quite a lot of the woo-woo in me, but I've kind of had to hide it, or always felt I had to hide it. So I was kind of hiding. So it was a bit like, oh, can I say this stuff in public? It's okay. And so she really helped me with combining the two in a way that really aligned with me and with the services I was offering as well.
Excellent. I love that. So today, one of the things I want to talk to you about is how entrepreneurs can use case studies in particular to get great publicity and to reach more of their ideal clients. So tell us a little bit about case studies and how they fit into publicity.
Yeah. So when I was working in the charity sector, one of my key roles was going around the country, interviewing people who we worked with and collecting these case studies, or success stories, you could call them as well. And I'd write them up and send them out to the regional press because the local newspapers absolutely love these really great human interest stories. And the thing with a case study is it doesn't have to just be limited to the local newspapers either. You can use them on your website as a way to dive deeper into the work that you're offering and what it would actually be like to work with you and the transformation that people go through. And you can use little snippets of it on your social media. You can use case studies if you were perhaps going to pitch a guest blog, or even you could potentially, if the person who was acting as your case study was happy to do it, you could both be interviewed together on, say, a podcast or a radio show, which I think would be a really great way to showcase your business in a different way. And the thing I wanted to talk about first is the difference between a case study and a testimonial.
Yes.
Because, we do see testimonials a lot, and people are always saying you've got to make sure you get your testimonials. They're great on your sales page. They're fantastic when you send them out on social media, and they give people an idea that you've done some work and that you're great. And the thing with a testimonial is it tends to be written in your client's words. And it's really about how great you are, how great it is working with you, how much difference it's made to them. And they tend to be little short snippets, as I said, that will go on your website or sales page. Sometimes they'll go a bit longer, but they're much more in your client's words, and they're quite promotion-y. Whereas a case study is much more about the case study herself. So it's her story and her transformation and the journey that she's been through. And the way that she's worked with you is almost like a little aside of the story that people will realise as they read the story and start to resonate with what she's saying and the struggles she's been through and how she overcome them with your support. So they're much more of a deeper dive into the way that people work with you, but it's really celebrating your case study as well, the person who you've got as the success story, and showcasing how you work, but in a really non-salesy way. And I think this is why journalists and editors really love case studies, because if they're kind of done correctly and written well, they're all about the person. They're not about the business owner. They're not just a massive sales pitch, which editors don't like. And if you think about it, when you're reading a magazine or you're reading a newspaper, you're going to get really bored if you're just reading an advert after advert after advert. Whereas if you're reading something about a person who's got a really interesting story and you're thinking, oh, wow, yes, gosh, yeah, that's exactly what it's like for me, or I really understand that. That totally is ringing bells for me. Then as you read through the story and you realise what she did to help herself or how she worked with you, and that's the key, to help herself, then the aim is for your ideal client to be reading that and to think, okay, great, I want a bit of that action. I'm going to go to your website. I'm going to look at how I can work with you as well. So, I mean, there's various steps that I talk about for actually collating your case studies. And the first one would be actually choosing the clients who you want to approach and see if they'd be happy to act as a case study. Now, you always need to obviously make sure you get consent from your clients before you do anything like that. And also it's important to check that they are happy for you to send the story to press or to blogs or any kind of media as well. And to be honest with you, I found that often people are really happy to. I mean, it will depend on their backstory, and you've got to make sure that you are very mindful of how much they want to share as well. But more often than not, people are really happy to help, and it can also be a bit of a win-win for you and your success story.
Yeah.
So, for example, if she has a business as well, then her business gets a little plug, your business gets a little plug, so you're both working really nicely in sync with each other. And
so when in the relationship do you ask this client to, if they want to be a part of a case study? Is it when you first start working with them, after you've had a couple sessions, at the end?
For me, it's normally at the end, because by then you will have built up a good rapport with your client, and you will get an idea of whether or not they're the kind of person who would be willing and happy to be promoted in this way. Because, understandably, a lot of people are a bit nervous of having their name or anything like that, or their picture in the newspaper. Yeah. And the other thing is that you want to be, it's nice to be able to illustrate their whole journey all the way through. So, if you've come to some kind of natural end point in the way you're working with each other, then that almost adds a nice bit of an ending to the story that you're writing up as well. I mean, once you've got a little bit of a body of case studies, you can send these case studies out to potential new clients, or I would have them on my website or on a client's website, so that they get an idea of what it's like to work with you. So they'll already be aware of the fact that you're using case studies in your marketing as well. So when you come to asking them if they'd like to be one, they're going to kind of know what you're talking about. And and what I do is I really like to interview people face to face. And when I was working with the charities, I'd actually travel around the country and actually meet up with them, talk to them face to face. Obviously, that's not always possible, but it's just as easy to do it over Skype. And you can send out a questionnaire if you want to. But the good thing I find with speaking with someone face to face is that you tend to get a bit more information from them. Things come up as you're chatting, as I'm sure you probably find as well with the podcast.
Yes.
You wouldn't necessarily have just come if you just sent a list of questions.
Oh, God, no.
Yeah. So I like to do it like that, and I record the interviews, and I let them know that I'm recording the interview, and that just helps with the writing up process.
Okay. So it's the entrepreneur herself who is writing up this whole case study and this whole...
It would be, So say, for example, you had worked with me, you would be writing up the case study about my transformation.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think with the interview as well, I have some questions that I generally ask, but as I said, it's quite nice to have it as a bit more conversational and a bit more flowing. So be prepared that things might come up, but you do want to make sure that the questions are really open-ended, so that people aren't just giving yes or no answers. They're giving you a bit more information. And I also think it's really great to actually talk a bit more about their feelings. And so I always include questions along the lines of, how were you feeling before we worked together? What impact was this having on your life or your business? What difference did it make to you? And then looking at, how are you feeling now? So you're actually getting really into the impact, the human interest bit. And it's not just, it's not just a dry write-up. It's actually got a bit more feeling, and it got a bit more person behind it. So, yeah.
Okay. So how long does this whole process take? Because you've got all the work that you would do normally of working with a client, plus you've got perhaps a questionnaire, you've got the interview, you've got to write this whole thing up. How long is the project of doing each case study?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, I suppose I normally would allow an hour for the interview, and then writing up the case study is, I suppose, because I do a lot of writing myself, I find that process quite easy, and I enjoy the process. So for me, it probably take a couple of hours, sometimes a little bit more. But once you've got it written up, there's so many different places that you can use it, because you can, as I said, send it to the press, use it on your website. And it's good to keep, even though the key with the write-up is you don't want to try and cram all of the information in there. Just pick out the key bits that are really important and that you think are going to resonate with your readers. And the other information that you've collated isn't going to go to waste, because you could potentially do another write-up or another pitch to a different magazine or a different blog editor with a slightly different take on the story, taking some of the other information, which is why I think it's great to get as much information as you possibly can when you're doing the case study. Yeah, so you have the write-up, and then, the pitching process itself. So when you're contacting editors and journalists and radio presenters or podcast presenters, there's often a little bit of toing and froing, so that can take a little while to get the coverage that you're after and to make sure that the story is right for them.
Right.
But it is really, I think it's a really great way of promoting your business, and I think it's something that as entrepreneurs we almost don't use enough. And and as I said, with the charity sector, that's one of the key ways that they get people involved and get people behind their cause. And I think, especially with a lot of the kind of heart-centered, caring entrepreneurs out there, it's a really nice way to show that aspect of your business as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very unique take on it, because as you say, a lot of entrepreneurs don't do this. So where would you put these case studies on your website? Would they be like a blog post? Would you have a separate section like how most people have testimonial section?
So at the moment on my own website, I just have them as a blog post, and then I'll link to them on different pages and throughout different blogs. But you could just as easily have it as an actual page, a case study page, and that's quite often how the charity sector would do it. So once you've got a little bit of a body of case studies, you could have a page with, say for example, you click on the case study page, and then you could have it by theme, or you could have it by name, and it'd be nice. It's nice to have an image of the person so that people can put a face behind the story. So you could have kind of 3 different images, and you click on each of the image, and then you go to the full write-up as well. I think that's quite a nice way to lay it out on your website.
Excellent. So is there any kind of specific format to be writing this up in, or guidelines to length?
Yeah, so I think of all my case studies in 3 sections, and I do kind of follow a little bit of a format when I'm writing them up. And this is something that I think the press also like this format, which helps if you're sending it out to other places as well as using it in your own marketing. So I start with the introduction, which introduces the person and talks about their backstory and introduces the problem that they were feeling, and kind of introduces the negative impact that was having on their life or their business as well. And then you move into the middle section, and this is where you can really start getting creative and talking about the journey and the feelings that are involved, and looking at how this person has transformed what they were doing, whatever their pain point is. And you can start bringing in how you worked with them as well. And it's really nice to intersperse the write-up. I write it in the third person, but it's nice to intersperse it with a few quotes from the person themselves in the first person. And then when you get to the final section, which is the conclusion, this is where you kind of have a really big celebration of what you're doing. And this is where it can become a little bit more about how you've worked together as well, and a bit more bigging up you as the entrepreneur as well as your success story. And I do think it's really nice as well to finish on a really, really strong quote from your client. And this can be almost like the testimonial quote.
Yeah.
It's absolutely fantastic working with Holly. I've never looked back. It's really transformed my business and my life, and that kind of thing. So that people come away from the story, they've been taken on a little bit of a journey, and as they come away, they feel uplifted as well. And if say, for example, you're sending it out to be featured on a blog, then it's worth including within the write-up just like 1 or 2 links back to your website, so that people can click and come back to your website. And you want to do it in a way that feels quite natural and isn't too self-promotion-y. And quite often they'll include a blurb at the end as well. And often, with the newspapers, they'll include a little bit at the end about the actual organisation that helped. So
Oh, excellent. So let's say you have a client that got great results with you. They're just a wild success story.
Mm-hmm.
They're happy to share their story, but they would rather do it anonymously.
Yeah.
Is that still worth doing? Or, because I imagine it doesn't quite have the power that unnamed.
Yeah. I think it's definitely still worth doing, especially definitely for your website and your newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
If you were looking at local press, they particularly want local stories that involve people who live in your area.
Mm-hmm.
So they're less likely to cover it if you haven't actually got the name and the photograph.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are pitching it to some of the more online magazine style publications or blogs, then they, I think, would be more likely to publish it. Because if you think you do, I mean, I'm just thinking of magazines I read, and so quite often there are stories and they have the little star and it says, name change.
Yes.
So, I don't think people mind that necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, if they've got a fantastic story, then it is definitely, and make sure you don't pressurize them, because it depending on the work you do, there's quite often some quite delicate subjects. So,
right. And of course, they're doing you a favor in the end.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you want to share as much as they're comfortable with. And I think, if you explain to them that you want to celebrate the work you've done together and that it will help you to reach more of your ideal clients and give people much more of an insight into what working with the entrepreneur is like, then I think, most people want to. But some people don't, and that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. I think that's a very important thing to say.
Yeah, definitely.
So, Becs, this has been super useful. How can our listeners or other women entrepreneurs who may come across you, how can they work with you?
Yes, so my business is Write and Reach, and my website is www.writeandreach.com, and I have various different ways you can work for me. I offer one-to-one publicity coaching, and there's the option for one-off or different packages, which is quite a nice place to start as well. I do also have the Publicity Program, which is the self-study course, which we mentioned earlier. And that's really nice if you want to boost your skills and kind of really learn quite in depth about how publicity can help you in your business. And then I do have a couple of VIP packages where I work really closely one-to-one with entrepreneurs as well. And that one of them is quite new up on my website, so I'm quite excited about that one too. So, yeah.
Excellent. So you've mentioned your website. Where else can people find you online? What social networks do you tend to hang out?
I'm on Facebook. I love Facebook. I'm on Facebook probably more than I should be. But yeah, and I'm Becs Miller on Facebook, and I love to hook up with other entrepreneurs, and they're more than happy to friend me. And I have also got a Facebook group. It's called Biz Stars, and it's quite a small, intimate, friendly Facebook group where we chat and I offer my PR and publicity tips throughout the week as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So are there any final words that you might have for listeners who think, wow, this sounds amazing. I've never heard of this before. It sounds really powerful, but it also sounds really daunting.
I think step by step, take things step by step, make a plan. Don't think to yourself, right, I need to go out there and get 10 case studies. Just approach one person who you've really enjoyed working with and who's really enjoyed working with you, and chat to them about it. And when you do the interview, you don't need to think, I've got to send this out to the press straight away. You can start off by putting it on your website and seeing what kind of interest and traction that has, and then formulate a little plan. And again, I would say, if you want to send it out to the media, just choose one place. Don't think you have to send it out to loads of different places. Just choose one place and use it as a way to build a relationship with the editor and to start chatting about how you can help them and how you can start promoting your business. And once you've done it once and seen your business out there, it's a real buzz, and you think, okay, maybe this isn't so daunting. Maybe I can actually do this,
Yeah, I think that's excellent advice. And I think it's also really important what you said about how you can help each other out, because the media obviously needs stories. They need stories that are relevant for their publication, but they need content. So if you can help them out and if you're a good fit, then it's a win-win.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was super, super useful, and I think it's a very different take on media and publicity and PR than we're used to hearing.
Great. Thank you, Holly. It's been absolutely great.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for listening. And remember to visit hollywharton.com/184 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Business Mindset Podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. You can find more information about today's episode, including links for topics that were discussed at hollywharton.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to head over to iTunes and leave a quick review of this podcast. It just takes a minute. Thank you.